I just, want to keep the culture alive, bring the classics, and bring the community together.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to Nostalgia on the Mic, the home of classic hip hop and soulful R&B vibes. I'm your host T, and this is episode 3, K-Cut, Main Source, Music, and more. Here we honor the legends, celebrate the culture, and keep the sound alive for the next generation. Look, as always, we have a great show lined up just for you. But first, make sure you like, comment, share, follow us on all platforms so you can be the first to catch exclusive content when it drops. Born in Toronto, Canada, and raised in Queens, New York, at the age of 3, Kevin McKenzie embarked on a musical journey at the tender age of 5. His musical roots can be traced back to relatives already established in the music industry, which nurtured a keen ear for music from a young age. This passion led to the genesis of a remarkable career. A pivotal moment came with the critically acclaimed album Breaking Atoms, which catapulted the careers of several artists, including Nas. This album marked the official disbandment of Kevin's group, leaving no choice but to persevere and dedicate themselves to honing their craft and releasing their music to the world. Kevin's accomplishments and productions span a diverse range of genres, including hip-hop, R&B, pop, and soundtracks for films and television shows. Notable collaborations include Queen Latifah, MC Lyte, 702, Ice-T, Big Pun, and Seal. His music has achieved gold and platinum certifications, solidifying its status as a commercial success. Kevin's contributions to the music industry have left an indelible mark, and it's undeniable that For Real is a testament to the authenticity and dedication of this remarkable artist. Now let's get into it. All right, K-Cut, we on. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I can't complain. I want to thank you for joining me this afternoon.
No doubt. For real.
So K-Cut, like I tell my guests, I'm not going to hold you long. We're going to get right into it, okay?
All right, let's get it.
So let's get started. When you first discovered hip hop, who or what drew you into the culture, and what point did you realize like this is something that I want to dedicate, myself to as a career?
Well, it it was in the 80s, like early 80s. Rapper's Delight was the first record I heard on the radio station, and that drew me to like wanting to be a part of the culture. And then after that, it was Run DMC when they came out with Sucker MC, and it was just like, yeah, this is it. This is what I want to do. So that's pretty much, that's pretty much what it is. You know what I mean? I know a lot of people in that were my age at that time were really into the culture as well. I mean, New York, growing up in the 80s, you know what I mean, when the graffiti and they had the movie Beat Street, that like pretty much cemented, like, you know what I mean, like you wanted to be a part of the culture, you know what I mean. So that I think that was the time where I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do.
How did that passion lead into forming Main Source? Can you take us kind of down how everything came together, from meeting Large Professor in, I believe, high school through
Yeah,
a
it
mutual
was. Yeah,
friend,
it
you
was.
building?
Yeah, I mean, it was a process, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
when I first got into the music industry, well, I come from a musical background. My grandfather's a musician, and you know what I mean. I have relatives that are what I mean, pretty much famous in the industry. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean. So it kind of like this is what I mean, from hearing hip hop and knowing that this is what I want to do. It was almost like a no brainer, right? So we started out with a group called New Crew. This was our first group before Main Source, and
Okay.
and it was me, my brother, and one of the kids that were related to Grandmaster Flash. He was, well, I think, a cousin or something like that. That was related to him. I don't know how. I forget how we met him, but it was he was a part of the group. We went in and we did a demo, and the demo was all right. It was like a beginner's demo, you know what I mean? And but it wasn't like this was it, right? So we were like, let's go back to the drawing board. So we pretty much like left that alone for a little bit. And when I got into high school, you know I used to cut school and basically go to Green Acres Mall and hang out Jamaica Avenue, you know what I mean, doing the stuff that kids would do. And one of my good friends was his name was Van. And Van, we used to, when we used to hang out, we used to just talk, a lot, and I used to talk about wanting to do a hip hop group and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And he was like, "Yo, I have a friend that rhymes," and it so happened to be Large Pro. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
he introduced me to Large Pro, and I was like, "All right, let me introduce you to the family. My mom and my brother. You know what I mean? Because my mom
Mhm.
was funding, like, the whole situation with us going into the studio and the group and everything like that. So when I introduced Large Pro, you know what I mean, it was pretty much official. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And the other two people that came to meet my mom and my brother was Neek the Exotic and another producer named Shy Skills. Shy Skills is the dude that produced Onyx. And
Okay.
he did slam and all of that stuff. God rest his soul. He's passed on now, but he was one of the guys that were coming that came as well. So you know um so happened, it worked out to be, what, they didn't want to be a part of the group. All
Mhm.
good. You know what I mean? And Large was like, yo, he saw the potential and being in the group. So from there that was it. You know what I mean? Murder She Wrote.
As your production style developed and became known for its creativity and originality, how would you describe your approach to making beats, and what does your process look like when building a track from scratch or from the idea of to the finished product, I should say?
Um my process is just, I like to go in the studio. I like to vibe out on records and just get inspired, right?
Hmm.
It could be a soul record, it could be a jazz record, it could be, funk, reggae, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Anything that's inspiring, and it just pretty much opens your mind to create, you know what I mean? And expand your mind to make good music, you know what I mean? And I think that's where it starts first. I find like whatever makes me feel good, and then I just chop it up in the SB12. Well, I don't use the SB12 anymore. I still have it, but I don't
Hmm.
use it. I use the MPC. But again, like, it's something that you just put in the machine, and you just chop it up, and then from there it's just like, okay, I have the basic loop, and then after the loop, I throw the drums in after. So I just search for the right type of drum that would fit, you know what I mean, the loop. And then from there it's just like, yeah, that's the magic right there. You know what I mean?
So, with main source sound, it stood out during a competitive era in hip hop. What do you think set your work apart at the time, and how did that approach shape tracks like looking at the front door?
I think for us, we weren't trying to be a group that we're following. You know what I'm saying? I think it was just a
Mhm.
vibe thing, like what felt good to us. You know what I mean? Like, because we myself and Large, he's a collector, I'm a collector, and it was when we were young. That's what we used to do, collect records. But we used to collect obscure, records that
Mhm.
you know that we know that people didn't have. You know what I'm saying? So when we would just go and put it together, and basically, you know what I mean, that's what we got out of, you know what I mean, finding, like, cool loops and great drum beats, you know what I mean? So
Mhm.
that's what I feel that, you know basically made us stand out, because we used stuff that other people didn't use, you know what I mean? And that became like a signature, you know what I mean? So for the group, you know what I mean? So I think that's what it is.
So, with that album, it also is notable for introducing, Nas on Live at the Barbecue.
Mhm.
What do you remember about that session with Nas, Joe Fatal, and Akinelli? And did you anticipate the impact it would have on hip hop?
I, you know what? I'm going to speak for all of us. We had no clue whatsoever. You know what I mean? Because that was actually the last song that was done for the album. And the funny thing about it, Stu Fine, the label owner, was like, "Hey, you guys need another song." You know what I mean? And we were like, "Really?" He was like, "You guys need another song. It would be great to have another song." He felt that the album was a little too short, and we need another song. So, Large was working with Nas and Akinelli and
Mhm.
Joe Fatal at the time. So it was just like, let's just bring those guys in. You know what I mean? We have a studio session booked at Homeboy Studio in the city, and that's what came out of it.
So you have worked with a wide range of artists over the years, including Big Pun, or God rest his soul,
Mhm.
Queen Latifah, Maestro, Fresh West, and even Shaquille O'Neal, just to name a few. Which
Mhm.
collaborations had the biggest impact on your career, and how do you adapt your sound, such as different artists? Which ones challenge you creatively the most?
I don't think anything really was challenge a challenge for me. I just think, you know, going in the studio and doing what you love to do, you know, and being around artists that inspire you,
Hmm.
that's the magic, you know what I mean? I think that's the magic right there. I think I had a really good time making records with Pun. He was just awesome. He was a funny dude in the studio, and it was just
Hmm.
like it just made it more exciting, you know what I mean? Um Queen Latifah was so amazing being in the studio with her. You know what I mean? It was just a great vibe. Like just, connecting with artists, your peers, and, them liking your music for them to call you to say, yo, we want you to produce that. Like
Yeah.
that's inspiring. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and I also work with MC Light. Like so again, like it's just being around my peers and being able to say, I remember your records, and you know what I'm saying? Like it just like gives you a jolt to say, okay, I'm in there, I'm working with these people and they love what I'm doing, so I'm here, you know what I mean? So yeah.
So sampling has been a key part of your music. How did you decide who or what to sample, and what guided your ear when digging through records and to find inspiration for your beats?
I just think it's a vibe, right? It's
Hmm.
just a vibe. When we dig, it's just like you don't know what you're gonna get when you're digging for records. You know what I mean? It's all a guess. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And when you pick up that record and you find something on it, it's just like, okay, you just go to the liner notes and you're like, okay, I see who's playing on that. And then when you go back and dig, then it's like, oh, that was the same guy that I found on that record. So let me pick that up. And then it
Hmm.
just becomes like a science of knowing how to dig for records and knowing what artists to look for. You know what I mean? So I think that's the inspiration and what I get from is just like when you see these funky covers and they look so cool, it's just
Hmm.
like you don't know what you're gonna get, but when you listen to the record, it's just like, oh my
Right.
god, you know what I mean?
So, coming from a West Indian background, how did your cultural roots influence your sound and perspective as a producer, and how did that shape the way you approach mentoring the next generation, including producers like Watts?
Mm. Um, I think having a West Indian background. I mean, it's just about culture, energy. Like, you know what I mean? It doesn't even have to be, a West Indian, thing. It could be African or, Afghani or, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just a, ethnic background that you have that, you're around music like soca, reggae, and all of this stuff, and it's just like, you know what? I want to incorporate that in what I'm doing, and you find where it fits, and if something fits that makes sense, you put it in the music, you know what I mean? And that's what I
Hmm.
do. I always like to add, like, a horn or whatever, a bass line or whatever to the music that I do that is, something to do with, the West Indies, you know what I mean? So, that's again, like, it's so inspiring. And when you dig into those records, you notice that they actually were mimicking soul records from back in those days in the 60s. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
I have records that are just like they would do like um what I want to say, like renditions of other soul records, like a James
Hmm.
Brown and everything like that. And
Hmm.
again, that's like a part of digging when you find like a reggae artist that's doing like a James Brown cover and stuff. You're like, holy smokes, this is crazy. And you
Yeah.
just again, it's like you opening Pandora's box, and this is like
Hmm.
you know what I mean. You find some cool stuff, you know what I mean. So, and then it's just like, all right, let me throw this in, in my music
Hmm.
because nobody's doing that. So it's
Right.
just like, you know what I mean. You find, again, it's finding your niche and finding what feels good, and it's all a part of like the sampling culture, and it's all a part of like, finding like cool stuff to make great songs with. You know what I mean?
So looking back, what were some of the biggest challenges, if there were any, that you faced as part of Main Source? And are there any unreleased tracks, stories, or moments from that era that fans will be surprised to hear about?
Um, we do have unreleased stuff, but I did something with a company called P Vine.
Okay.
They wanted to release like our unreleased stuff, but the funny thing about it was that the quality, and I told the label, listen, the quality is so bad, like why would you want to release this? And
Hmm.
they were like, well, we just want people to get your unreleased stuff. So I was like, it's bad. So I said, I
Hmm.
told them, I said to them, you know what, you guys need to let the public know that these are only demos, and the quality is not good. So what you're buying into, I don't like to, do
Yeah.
something where people are like, oh, I thought this was going to be like a premium sound or whatever, whatever,
Hmm.
and they kind of, didn't do that. And I was really pissed about that. But
Gotcha.
at the end of the day, it's just like, you know, it's gonna be destroyed anyways, you know what I mean, and might as well put it out there, so the fans can hear something that we were working on at the time or whatever, you know what I mean. I
Hmm.
feel that was the what I wanted to really, establish, you know what I mean. It
Yeah.
wasn't about like, you know trying to get money, but it was about like, these, if I don't do anything with them, they're gonna be ruined anyways,
Right.
because they're like, nobody would hear them forever, right? Because they're on
Right.
cassette tapes, they're on baked reels, you know what I mean? So it's just
Hmm.
like, you know what? We'll put it out there. You know what I mean? It wasn't a money thing for me, and it wasn't anything like that. It was just, giving back to the fan and giving back to the culture. You know what I mean? And that's how I looked at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So the industry has changed dramatically since the early days. How do you feel about the evolution of hip hop production today, and what lessons from your time with Main Source continue to influence how you approach music?
I think it's about to be a 360 in terms of music is going back to the nostalgic way of how it came, where it came
Hmm.
from. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
think that's a great thing, because I think we are in a stagnant moment right now with music, and the reason why I say that is because and I don't like to diss other, the younger generation and what they're doing, but I do say that a lot of people that love hip hop and love the culture, they love
Hmm.
music of, that makes a little bit more sense, you know what I mean, and
Right.
has a lot more meaning to it. And I
Hmm.
think, our era, the golden era, was the era that, there was like pro black, you know what I mean, you had Brand Nubians, you had De La Soul, you know what I mean,
Hmm.
you had leaders of the new school, you had Pete Rock and CL Smooth, you know what I'm
Hmm.
saying, like, and Main Source, and a bunch of artists, right?
Right.
And all of us had something that we had to say, you know what I mean? But
Hmm.
now these days, it's just like there's nothing that's really relevant to like anything, you know what I mean, of culture
Substance.
or of substance, you know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? So it's just like now people are going back to like, yo, they're finding like the Main Source, they're finding like the Pete Rocks, they're finding like Common Sense, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So those, I think that's where we're going back to. That's why I say the 360. It's going back to the 360, because these were, iconic groups, you know what I mean, that
Right.
made sense and had substance to bring. And that's why, groups like Main Source and, all the other ones, down the line,
Hmm.
we have longevity, you know what I'm saying,
Right.
to this day, you know what I'm saying, because we did say things that, made sense, when you
Hmm.
listen to songs like Friendly Game of Baseball and Faking the Funk and Peace is Not the Word to Play. These are songs that are, giving back to the culture because there's a
Mhm.
meaning to all of these songs. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Absolutely. If you could go back and change anything about your career or the group's trajectory, would you? Or when you reflect on your legacy now, what are the achievements and moments you are most proud of?
Um, I'm definitely proud of everything, that went down. If could be any changes, I think the transparency of, the group before it broke up, you know what I mean? I think that would
Hmm.
have been great if we had a conversation and a real heart to heart. But when you're kids, growing up in the industry, people just want to separate you and don't, you know what I mean, and they want to
Hmm.
take the ones that are more famous than the others, and it's just a money grab, right? People, that's what they do, and that's how they separate groups, and that's how groups get destroyed, because it's just like, no, he's the guy, so we got to, rock with that guy and forget the others. You know what I mean? They'll find their
Hmm.
way. You know what I mean? But it's just, you start to understand the business a little bit more. You know what I mean? And you just, basically MacGyver yourself through and see what fits for you, and you just keep it moving. You know what I mean?
And finally, K Cut, what advice would you give up and coming producers trying to find their voice, develop their sound, and make their mark in today's music industry?
Keep doing your beats, and it's easier now because there's so many ways that you could solicit your music and have people hear it. So if you feel that you have something that's of substance, and you feel that you have something that people want,
Hmm.
there's social media, there's so many different
Right.
avenues where you can, you know what I mean, do it. Back then, we didn't have that. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
We had to record it and solicit, through labels, and hopefully a label would get it to the artist. But now these days you can just, record yourself and be in the studio chopping up, and if people their ears are like, yo, that's crazy,
Hmm.
let me get in contact with that dude. You know what I mean? And
Right.
that's the best way right now. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
And Kiko, did you have any events or anything that you're working on that you wanted to make announce?
I'm actually working on a project with Mikey D. Um,
Okay.
so we are actually working on another main source record. You know what I mean? So that's what I want to put out there. That's going down right now. We got a couple of heads that are going to be on the record. You know what I mean? So I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but we got a couple of, special people that will be appearing on this album. You know what I mean? So it's going to be cool, and I can't wait to actually get it done, you know what I mean, and get it out there.
Nice, nice. Okay, Cut, I want to thank you again for joining me this afternoon for this
Absolutely.
session. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you for having me, for real.
Until next time, nostalgia on the mic.
There you go. Peace.